Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. I would never date him now. The words were like a sharp blade, stabbing right into Miles Sullivan's chest. He stood in the hallway leading to the kitchen, holding a bouquet of wildflowers he'd just brought in from the yard as a surprise for Avery. Yet the words struck him like a thunderbolt, and he couldn't move. Avery's voice came from the kitchen, relaxed and guilt-free. Seriously, Phoebe, we've been married for 9 years. If I knew Miles now, I wouldn't date him, much less marry him. We're too different. But aren't you guys fine? There was confusion in Phoebe's voice. Miles is a good man and Harper loves him. It looks good on the surface, and that's the problem. Avery sighed. He can fix anything in the house. He can take care of Harper. He goes to work every day and never complains. But Phoebe, I feel like I'm suffocating. There is no passion, no art, no common language between us. When Dominic talks about a painting or a building, he has a light in his eyes. Miles would just ask how much that shit cost. Miles felt a wave of dizziness. Dominic? The architect who works with Avery on a regular basis? What happened between them? You and Dominic are close, aren't you? There was concern in Phoebe's tone. Avery laughed a low laugh, the kind Miles hadn't heard in a long time, light and vibrant. He gets me, Phoebe. Not just my work, but my ideas, my dreams. Miles never asks about that. Dominic asked, and he really wanted to know the answer. Miles gripped the wildflowers in his hand and felt them slowly wilt in his palm. He wordlessly backed away and walked out of the house, dropping the bouquet into the trash can in the front yard. At that moment, he knew his marriage had been thrown in the trash as well. Avery just hadn't told him yet. Miles met Avery 9 years ago when he had just become a full-fledged member of the Denver Fire Department, after 3 years of internships and rigorous training to finally get what he wanted. Coming from a family of firefighters, both his father and grandfather were firefighters, he has a lot of respect and love for the profession. The day that changed his life was a sunny spring Wednesday. The fire department was conducting a routine fire drill at the local art academy, and Miles was in charge of inspecting the West Wing drawing rooms. He traversed the corridors of the academy, the sound of his saws scraping against the marble floor especially noticeable in the quiet. Only the day before, they'd dealt with a dangerous warehouse fire in which his coworker, Jenkins, had nearly been struck by a collapsing ceiling. Such experiences have made Miles more serious about security programs. He pushed open the oak door to the drawing room, the shaft creaking slightly. Sunlight poured in through the tall windows and shone on a young woman who stood in front of the canvas, waving her brush with all her concentration, her arms splattered with various colors of paint, and the faintly audible sound of music coming out of her headphones. She was completely absorbed in her own world, oblivious to the commotion around her. "Ma'am, this is a fire drill. Please evacuate immediately," Miles said in that professional, firm voice of his. The woman turned around, her face stained with a bit of blue paint that shimmered in the sunlight. She wore a surprised expression, her eyes wide open like a startled deer. "Oh, really? I didn't hear the alarm at all." "Because you're wearing headphones." Miles pointed to her ear, a hint of tenderness in his tone that he didn't even notice himself. Embarrassed, she removed her headphones and gave an embarrassed smile, a strand of curly brown hair falling across her forehead. "I got too into it. The painting is to be exhibited next week. The theme is Soul of the City, and I have to finish it. See, here is the pulse of the city, and these blue lines represent how people's dreams travel between steel and concrete." Miles looks at the canvas and, although he doesn't quite understand abstract art, can feel a strange attraction. It's very vitality, but I'm afraid it'll have to wait. Safety first. He held out his hand, the one roughened from years of work. "I'm Miles Sullivan, C-shift firefighter. Avery Bennett, future artist. If I make it out of this building without a fire alive," she said mischievously, taking his hand, the corners of her mouth slightly upturned, showing an unfettered free spirit. It was at that moment that Miles felt some sort of electric current pass from their clasped hands, through his entire body, a sensation he had never experienced before. Avery's eyes are an incredible gray-green, bright and expressive, as if they contain the entire universe. In that brief encounter, Miles understood for the first time why people are crazy about art, because it evokes this vibration that cannot be described in words. Their romance is fast and passionate, Unlike Miles' steady personality, Avery is energetic and creative, always seeing the good in the world. Their differences seem complementary. He provides security and stability. She brings color and passion. The wedding, which took place a year after they met, was simple and cozy. Miles' colleagues formed the honor guard, and Avery's artist friends set up the venue like a dream. Avery sparkled in the sunlight in a simple white wedding dress. Miles still remembers the unspeakable happiness and pride in his heart when he saw her walking towards him. Harper was born the second year of their marriage, a healthy and lively girl with Miles' fortitude and Avery's creativity. The arrival of a new life breathed new life and responsibility into their marriage. Miles works harder and gets promoted to fire department junior chief, while Avery puts aside her artistic dreams for a while to focus on parenting. However, over time, the humdrum of life began to replace the initial enthusiasm. Miles' work scheduling, 24 hours on duty, 48 hours off, means he's often absent from important moments in his family's life. And when he's home, exhaustion often makes him just want to sit quietly in the backyard, drink a beer, and do some woodworking. Avery grew to feel lost. Her artistic talents were not utilized as much as they should have been, and childcare and housework took up most of her time. When Harper started school, Avery decided to return to the workforce, but instead of going back to pure art, he opted for a more pragmatic approach to interior design, opening a small studio. "It's a good compromise," she told Miles. "I can use my artistic skills and still make money for my family." Miles fully supported her decision and even helped her convert part of her garage into a studio. He was proud of her thriving career, even if it meant they spent less time together. Avery's studio is little known in the area, especially among young professionals seeking unique designs. She began to meet more like-minded people, attending design exhibitions and social events. Miles, on the other hand, was rarely able to accompany her to these occasions due to the nature of his work. "Can you come tonight? This exhibition is important to me," Avery asked while organizing her portfolio. Miles shook his head. "I'm sorry, I'm on duty tonight, but I'm sure you'll shine." Avery sighed in disappointment. "You're always absent from the important moments in my life, Miles." "That's not fair, Avery. My job is such that I can't choose when there's a fire." Miles felt a little hurt. "And I support you in every decision you make, building a studio, going to shows, everything." Support isn't just lip service, Miles. It's presence, it's participation, it's understanding. Avery shook her head, grabbing her bag and getting ready to leave. "Forget it. Harper's spending the night at a friend's house. You're going to pick her up straight after work at 6 in the morning, okay?" Miles nodded. "Sure, I'll pick her up on time. You have fun tonight, for both of us." He kissed her cheek, but felt her response was a little cold. This sense of distance has become more pronounced lately, but Miles attributes it to the pressures of their busy lives and careers. He told himself that when Harper was older and the pace of life slowed down, they'd get back to the way they were. Dominic Reed first walked into Avery's studio with an offer to collaborate on a large apartment remodeling project. "Your portfolio is impressive," he said, gracefully taking a seat in the chair across from her. "Especially your very adventurous handling of color and texture." Avery felt a surge of pleasure. "Thank you. I try to incorporate some artistic elements into every project. It makes the space more alive. Just what we need." Dominic smiled, his eyes, deep brown, looking intently at her. The client for this project was an art collector who wanted his home to be both a residence and a display space. "I can't think of anyone better suited for the program than you." That afternoon, they discussed design ideas, and the time flew by. When it comes to favorite artists, Avery was surprised to find that they share similar tastes. "You like Rothko too?" she asked in surprise. "Most people don't understand his work." Dominic nodded. "His paintings make me feel calm and thoughtful. The colors will talk, if you're willing to listen." Exactly the kind of feeling Miles never understood, Avery thought, but didn't say. Once the collaborative project began, Avery and Dominic met frequently at the job site to discuss progress and solve problems. Their professional relationships became progressively more personal. Sometimes they would have lunch together after the meeting and share stories about their respective lives. Dominic was divorced once and has no children. "I was too focused on my work," he admitted, "and she said I wasn't there, even though I was there in person." Eventually, we became strangers living under the same roof. This honesty makes Avery feel close. At some point, she realized she was sharing in the loss she felt in her own marriage. Miles is a good man, she said, swirling her glass of wine. But sometimes I don't think he knows me at all. We used to be two people so different, attracted to each other. Now these differences seem to separate us. Dominic's gaze was full of understanding. Sometimes loving someone isn't enough. It takes understanding and appreciation. When she got home that night, Avery looked at Miles, who was doing carpentry in the backyard, and suddenly felt an uncanny sense of loss. He was a good husband and father, but that deep connection she longed for deep down never seemed to come. Social media became Avery's way of escaping reality. She started sharing her design work and daily inspirations on Instagram and gained quite a following. Every like and comment gave her a feeling of being understood and appreciated. Dominic is one of her biggest fans and often makes thoughtful comments on her posts. They began communicating through private messages, sharing ideas, and encouraging each other. Soon, these conversations became more and more personal. One night, Miles is on duty, Harper is spending the night at a friend's house, and Avery is home alone. She gets a text from Dominic. At work? Yes, in preparation for tomorrow's client meeting. What about you? She replied. Just finished a book that reminded me of you. Color Theory, about how color affects our emotions and decisions. Their conversations continued late into the night. When Dominic asked her if she'd like to have dinner the next day to discuss the new project, Avery said yes with little hesitation. It's just a working dinner, she told herself, completely professional in nature. But she spent more time than usual choosing her clothes and makeup, eventually choosing a dark blue dress that Miles had never seen before. After dinner, Dominic suggested checking out a small art gallery nearby. It was a private show featuring the work of emerging artists. Standing in front of a vibrant abstract painting in the dim light, Avery felt Dominic's hand gently touch her waist. She didn't duck. The first kiss happened when he walked her back to her car, in the shadows of the parking lot. It was a gentle and tentative kiss, but it was enough to break the final boundary. Avery knows what she's doing, knows it's wrong, but she can't fight the feeling of being truly understood. I shouldn't have done that, she whispered, but didn't push him away. Dominic gazed into her eyes. Tell me you don't want this, and I'll stop. She didn't say anything, just kissed him again. For the next few weeks, Avery lived in two worlds. At home, she plays the role of wife and mother, preparing dinner, helping Harper with his homework, and engaging in superficial conversations with Miles. But her mind had drifted elsewhere. She started making up excuses to go out. Client meetings extended, design exhibits, material sourcing. Miles never questioned her, he trusted her. That trust is now a burden, a silent reproach. Sometimes, when Miles reaches around her in his sleep, Avery feels an intense pang of guilt. But the next day, when she receives a text from Dominic, that feeling is replaced with anticipation. Their affair became bold. Sometimes it's in Dominic's apartment, sometimes it's in a hotel on a business trip. Each time, Avery told herself it was the last time, but she couldn't stop. We should be together, Dominic said one day in a moment when they embraced, really together. You're not happy, Avery, and you know it. Avery didn't answer. She imagines herself leaving Miles and starting a new life with Harper. But what about Harper? She loved her father. And the home they built, the mutual friends, the 9 years of marriage. Can all this really just be put down? Miles has been noticing changes in Avery for some time now. She was more distracted, checking her phone a lot, smiling more often, but rarely because of him. At first, he thought it was a sign that she was doing well at work and was happy for her. Until the day he overheard that conversation and heard her say, I would never date him now. In that moment, all the suspicions suddenly linked together to form a truth he didn't want to face. His first reaction was to question her directly, and his mind was already conjuring up images of himself storming into the kitchen, slamming glasses, and yelling. But 15 years of training as a firefighter and countless experiences facing life-and-death scenarios have taught him to remain calm in critical situations. He took a deep breath and let his anger slowly settle. He kept his cool during search and rescue operations after an F4 tornado, in the rubble of a chemical plant explosion, and during an apartment building fire that trapped 3 children. Now, faced with the firestorm of his own marriage, he needs the same clear head. That night, Miles sat alone on a bench in his backyard, staring up at the stars and contemplating his next move. On the balcony sits the wooden ship model he is carving for Harper's birthday. That unfinished boat seemed so ironic at the moment. Like the marriage he thought was safe and secure turned out to be nothing more than an unfulfilled and possibly never to be fulfilled dream. What should I do? He asked himself in a low voice, his fingers unconsciously stroking his wedding ring. How ironic that 9 years ago, he had proposed to Avery in this same backyard, promising with all his heart to love and protect her forever. Right now, all he needs to protect is himself and Harper from Avery's lies. Over the next few days, Miles began to consciously observe, gathering evidence as carefully and systematically as he had investigated the source of the suspicious fire. He records every aberrant behavior, every sign of suspicion. He notices that Avery always places her cell phone on the lock screen instead of casually on her desk, as she used to do. She changes her cell phone's passcode even though he never tries to unlock it. Her work schedule becomes irregular, and she often comes home late without prior notification. And her patience with Harper diminishes noticeably with her being distracted from time to time, as if her mind is always elsewhere. Most heartbreaking for Miles, Harper begins to notice a change in the family atmosphere. One night, while he was reading Harper a bedtime story, the little girl suddenly asked, "Daddy, why is Mommy always looking at her phone? She used to play games with us." Miles fought back tears and gently kissed her daughter's forehead. "Mommy's been busy at work lately, baby. She has a lot of important clients to take care of." "More important than us?" Harper asked innocently. Miles couldn't answer, but could only hold his daughter tightly. He knew he had to protect Harper from whatever happened next. He didn't invade her privacy to look at her cell phone or computer. That's not what he did. But he did check their shared cloud account, where family photos and documents were stored. To his shock, Avery hadn't uploaded any family photos in months, but her Instagram account was very active. He's never particularly paid attention to social media, but now he's created an anonymous account to view her public posts. Most of it is her design work and art inspiration, and it looks very professional. But the comments section of some of the photos caught his attention, especially from a user named D_architect. The reviews themselves seem professional, but the tone reveals a sense of familiarity. "The way you capture light is amazing, and this color choice shows the boldness of your heart." These are not just comments about the work, but a personal understanding of the creator. Miles remembers Dominic Reed, tall, well-dressed, soft-spoken, elegant, the kind of man he was in stark contrast to. They'd met at a couple of Avery's work-related events, and Miles had noticed at the time that Dominic was looking at Avery a little differently, but he'd attributed it to professional admiration. Now it seems to be far more serious than that. Miles decided to find out more about Dominic. Through a simple internet search, he discovered that Dominic was a successful, award-winning architect with his own small practice. His website showcases many high-end projects, several of which were done in collaboration with Sullivan Interior Design, Avery's company. The collaboration began 6 months ago, just as Avery's behavior began to change. He continued his investigation and found some suspicious restaurant purchases on their shared credit card bill, upscale restaurants, on nights when Miles was on duty. Avery claims those were client meetings, but now Miles is starting to get suspicious. The most disturbing discovery was that a sizable amount of money was transferred from the family account to Avery's personal account. She has never done this before and has always been transparent about all household expenses. Each new discovery is like a knife stabbing into Miles' heart. He loves Avery, always has. He was proud of her, supported her career, and respected her independence. He thought the problem between them was just a temporary estrangement that could be repaired with more communication and understanding. Now it seems that the problem is far more serious than he thought. He considered just confronting her and demanding an explanation. But somehow he knew that wouldn't get to the truth. If she was willing to betray their marriage, she would have been willing to lie about it. One night, when he comes home from his shift and realizes that neither Avery nor Harper are there, Avery says they went to a school function, Miles makes a decision. He sat on a bench in the backyard, looking out over the small garden he'd built with his own hands, thinking about how to save his broken family, or, if it couldn't be saved, how to end it with dignity. Liam, his close friend and coworker, has experienced failed marriages and knows a thing or two about the situation. If it's true what you say, then you need to protect yourself and Harper, Liam advised, legally and emotionally. Miles nodded. I don't want to hurt Avery, but I can't pretend like nothing happened either. What are you going to do? Liam asked. Miles was silent for a moment, then said, I want her to understand the price of betrayal. Not just the damage to our marriage, but the damage to Harper and everything she's built. Be careful, man. Revenge looks sweet, but it usually just makes everyone more miserable. This isn't revenge, Miles said, his voice low and firm. It's a lesson. If she wanted to leave me, she could have just said so. But deception and betrayal? It would be a desecration of everything we've built together. Liam looked at his friend and recognized the determination in his eyes, the kind of steely look you only get when facing a dangerous fire. Whatever you decide to do, I support you. Just don't do anything you'll regret. Miles nodded, already forming a plan in his head, not out of spite, but out of a deep disappointment and a desire for justice. He won't resort to violence or breaking the law. That's not his style. But he'll make sure Avery and Dominic understand that every choice has consequences and every betrayal has a price. First, he needs more evidence, not only to confirm your suspicions, but also for possible future divorce proceedings. Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, meaning he doesn't need to prove Avery's infidelity to get a divorce, but the evidence could be helpful in property division and child custody issues. Secondly, he needs to protect Harper. Whatever happens, he doesn't want his daughter to be a victim of this storm. He needs to ensure her emotional security and future stability. In the end, he needed a plan, one that would allow Avery to truly understand the consequences of her actions. Not to hurt her, but to make her face reality. Miles' plan is starting to take shape. He'll utilize his woodworking skills to create a powerful visual statement, a display of truth that Avery won't be able to ignore. He would choose a specific day, a time that would maximize his impact. He begins preparing materials, working in secret in his garage, taking advantage of Avery and Harper's time away from home. He collected family photos, printed evidence, and conceptualized a way to convey his message perfectly. In the meantime, he contacted a divorce attorney and learned about his rights and options. He opened a separate bank account and began depositing a portion of his salary into it in case of a financial emergency. He also spoke privately with Harper's school counselor, explaining possible impending family changes and requesting their attention to Harper's emotional state. All of this he did while maintaining a superficial calm. He still goes to work on time, takes care of Harper, and interacts with Avery on a daily basis. He shows no signs of knowing the truth, which allows Avery to continue her double life, unsuspecting. Miles chose the day of action, the day before Avery Studios' anniversary celebration. She plans to throw a small party and invite clients, partners, and friends to celebrate her professional accomplishments. It will be a highlight for her, showcasing what Sullivan Interior Design has accomplished over the past year. It is on this day that Miles will reveal the truth, not to destroy her career, but to make her face her choices. During the conceptualization of his revenge plan, Miles goes through an intense internal struggle. There were times when he almost gave up on the whole plan when he saw Harper and Avery laughing and watching TV together. Maybe he can pretend it didn't happen and continue the marriage for Harper's sake. Maybe Avery will come around and end her relationship with Dominic. But every time those thoughts surfaced, he remembered the words, "I would never date him now." The longing in Avery's eyes for Dominic, and the pain of having his dignity trampled on. No, he couldn't pretend everything was normal. How can he teach Harper self-respect and courage if he doesn't respect himself? Miles begins working secretly in the garage, taking advantage of Avery and Harper's absence. His carpentry skills, a hobby for many years, and one that Avery often derides as old-fashioned, are now a central tool in his plan for revenge. He carefully selected every plank, every photograph, every piece of evidence. The design of the installation incorporates artistic principles he unintentionally learned from Avery: contrast, tension, emotional impact. Ironically, he is exposing her betrayal in the artistic language she taught him to appreciate. The centerpiece of the installation is a wooden frame that symbolizes their family structure. The outer layer is photos of good times, their wedding, Harper's birth, family vacations. As the viewer delves deeper, Photographs are gradually replaced by evidence, screenshots of text messages, billing records, cross-references to dates and times that show a pattern of Avery's lies. The most impactful part is a series of photo frames arranged in a timeline format. On the left are photos of Miles and Harper at home. He helps his daughter with her homework, cooks together, and plays in the backyard. On the right is evidence of Avery and Dominic on the same day, restaurant receipts, hotel records, photos taken by a friend who happened to meet them. This direct contrast sharply demonstrates the two sides of her life. In the final stages of the program, Miles contacted several key people: Avery's sister Phoebe, a few of her close friends, and some important clients. He didn't give specifics, except to invite them to come a day early for a special presentation. "It's a surprise," he told them, deftly choosing to say something that was neither a lie nor would reveal the truth, to celebrate Avery's achievement. Making these calls is one of the hardest parts. When Phoebe excitedly asks if she needs her to bring anything, Miles almost blurts out the truth. But he controlled himself. "As long as you're on time." It's going to be a memorable day for Avery. Most gladly accepted the invitation, albeit with some skepticism. No one doubts Miles' intentions. He's always been a good and supportive husband to his wife, and this seems like just another thoughtful gesture. Meetings with lawyers have also been completed. Miles learned all the details of custody, property division, and divorce proceedings. He protected himself and Harper as far as the law would allow, ensuring that even in the worst-case scenario, they would not be homeless or destitute. As for Harper, it was the most agonizing decision. After much deliberation, he decided to let her witness a simplified version of the truth. Not all the details, but enough to make her realize that the impending changes in the family were not without reason. He knew it would hurt her, but honesty might be the only way out in the long run. Children can perceive lies, and the damage of growing up with lies can be even more profound. As the final preparations were completed, Miles felt a strange sense of calm. Not the thrill of revenge, but the relief of finally being free of the weight of the lie. He wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, but he knew he couldn't continue to live a lie. Whatever the outcome, the truth needs to be revealed. He sat in the chair in front of the contraption and thought back to the good times in his marriage. The way Avery had laughed and laughed on their first date. The love in her eyes as she walked toward him at the wedding. The joy they'd felt when they'd clasped hands when Harper was born. And then the present. Empty greetings, perfunctory kisses, and backstabbing betrayals. Tears fell quietly, but he quickly wiped them away. He allowed himself to grieve, but not to retreat. He looked at the installation he had created, a complex structure of family photographs, evidence, and symbolic objects that took up the entire living room. It tells a story, their story, from a beautiful beginning to a bitter betrayal. Tomorrow, when that loud noise awakens Avery, when she rushes down the stairs and sees the scene and all the witnesses, there will be no place for her to hide. Truths will be revealed, choices will be faced, and consequences will be borne. Miles took one last look at his work, the faint light reflecting off the glass of the frame and reflecting his haggard face. He took a deep breath and closed the garage door. Now, just wait for the dawn. A loud noise shook Avery awake, and she sat up violently from her bed, her heart beating wildly. It wasn't an ordinary sound, not the sound of a door closing or something falling. It was a deliberate sound, like the sharp echo of metal hitting wood, and it stung in the silence of the morning. It was still light outside, and the room was shrouded in a dim blue morning light, with a faint glimmer of light coming through the edges of the curtains, depicting the outlines of the furniture. She reached for the other side of the bed, and her fingers touched the cold sheets, devoid of human warmth. Miles wasn't there. The sheets were flat, and no one seemed to have slept all night. A sense of foreboding surged through her like an electric current, and tiny chilly hairs stood up on her arms. There was another loud thud, this time clearer and more purposeful, like something had been heavily lowered or moved. The voice came from downstairs, echoing through the quiet house, almost with a rhythm, as if calling to her. Avery glanced at the alarm clock on the nightstand, and the numbers read 5:20 a.m. The red numbers flashed in the darkness. Miles should still be on duty. According to his schedule, he doesn't get off until 6. Harper went to a friend's house last night for a sleepover and doesn't plan to be back until tomorrow. There shouldn't be anyone in the house. She fumbled for her cell phone and saw that there were no messages from Miles on the screen. Last night, her text to Dominic still lies in the dialogue box. See you tomorrow. Can't wait. She quickly deleted the message, a mixture of guilt and fear filling her chest. Fear crawled up her spine. She grabbed her cell phone and tried to dial 911, but hesitated. What if it's just Miles coming home early? Miles, she shouted, her voice echoing through the silent house. No response. Avery took a deep breath and got out of bed. She picked up the decorative vase that sat on her nightstand as a makeshift weapon and slowly made her way out of the bedroom. The hallway was dark, with only a glimmer of light coming up from the bottom of the stairs. Anyone? She cried out again, her voice trembling with fear. There was still no response, only a slight movement from downstairs. Sensing trouble, she gathered her courage and walked down the stairs. Each step crunched under her feet, as if warning her not to proceed. However, a strange attraction prompted her to continue down the path. As she reached the bottom of the stairs and turned toward the living room, the sight before her froze her in place, the vase in her hand slipping and shattering on the floor. "Oh my God," she whispered, covering her mouth with both hands. The living room was completely remodeled. In the center is a huge art installation consisting of dozens of wooden panels, each with photos and printed text attached. The whole structure is like a labyrinth or kaleidoscope, presenting different images from different angles. Small spotlights dotted around the installation cast dramatic light effects. But it's not the device itself that's truly frightening. It's the story it tells. The outermost layer is her wedding photos with Miles, happy family times, Harper's birth, vacations spent together. The photos are arranged to form a seemingly perfect family portrait. But as she approached, she saw the inner layer, a picture of her and Dominic. She recognized the photographs with horror, them sitting next to each other in the restaurant. The blurry but recognizable figures kissing outside the gallery, the back of him walking into the hotel, his hand on her waist. There were also screenshots of text messages, email conversations, restaurant and hotel purchases marked on credit card bills, records of transfers from family accounts to her personal account. All of these are skillfully arranged to tell an undeniable story of betrayal. At the center of the installation is a smaller structure, like a small house, representing their home. It is split in half by a crack, in the middle of which is placed a picture of Harper with her smiling face torn in half, symbolizing the divided family. And at the top of the entire installation, arranged in large letters, is a quote, "I would never date him now." Avery said that to her sister. Miles didn't know, couldn't have known. But he did know. She heard a footstep behind her and turned to see Miles standing there. He was dressed in civilian clothes rather than a firefighter's uniform. His eyes were bloodshot, and exhaustion and determination were written all over his face. "You're home early," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I took a leave of absence," he replied simply, his voice awfully calm. There were more important things to take care of. Avery felt his legs go weak and leaned against the wall to support himself. "Miles, I can explain." "There's no need to explain," he interrupted her, pointing to the device. "Everything is there. Facts speak louder than words." Avery's eyes scanned the room, noting that the curtains were drawn and the early morning light was beginning to shine through. Outside, there were several unfamiliar cars parked on the street. "Is anyone coming?" she asked, suddenly realizing the greater fear that awaited her. Miles nodded. 9 o'clock. "I invited some people to come and see my artwork." "What man?" Her voice trembled. "Your sister Phoebe, your friend Naomi, a couple important clients, and Harper." "Harper? No, Miles, you can't do this to her." Avery felt a wave of panic. "She's 8. She shouldn't be seeing this." "She won't see all the details," Miles said, "and I've got a simplified version for her. But she needs to know why her family is about to change and why her mother no longer lives with her father. I won't let her believe that I abandoned you." Avery felt tears well up in her eyes. "Are you trying to destroy me? My career, my reputation, everything?" Miles' expression softened for a moment, then became firm again. "No, Avery. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm just making you face the consequences of your choices. You chose betrayal. You chose lies. You chose Dominic. Now you need to be open about those choices and be honest about them." "Why?" she asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why don't you just talk to me or file for divorce? Why such a public humiliation?" Because you didn't give me a choice, Miles replied, with suppressed anger in his tone. You didn't sit down and tell me you weren't happy. You didn't file for divorce or separation. You didn't give our marriage a decent end. You chose to cheat and betray and stab me in the back while enjoying the security and stability I provide. That's not fair, Avery protested, but there was a lack of undertone in his voice. What's not fair is when I hear my wife tell her sister she won't date me while I'm standing in the hallway with the flowers I bought her. What's not fair is that I spent 9 years building a family just to watch it fall apart because of lies. It's not fair that Harper will grow up in a broken home because you can't be honest about your grievances. Avery was speechless. She felt a wave of nausea as she looked at the intricate contraption. How long did it take Miles to build it? How did he gather all this evidence? How did he know? How long has it been? She finally asked. When did I find out? Miles sighed. A couple weeks ago when you and Phoebe were talking in the kitchen. But I'm guessing this thing with you and Dominic has been going on much longer. 6 months? Longer. For months, she admitted in a whisper, but not. It wasn't physical at first. We're just talking, that's all. It doesn't matter when it went bad, Miles said. What matters is that you chose to let it happen, chose to keep it going, chose to lie to me. Avery wants to plead her case, to explain how she feels neglected, how she longs to be understood, how she has a spiritual connection with Dominic. But they all sounded like excuses, even in her own ears. What should I do? She asked desperately. You have 2 choices, Miles said calmly. The first is that you leave now, take your things, and disappear before people arrive. I'll tell them you had an emergency and had to leave. It will give you some time to reorganize, but sooner or later, the truth will come out. What about the second option? You stay and face it. Face Phoebe, face your friends, face your clients. Most importantly, face Harper. Admit your mistake, accept the consequences, and then we part ways in a civilized manner. Avery stared at the floor, contemplating her options. Running away seems like the easier path, but that means living in perpetual fear, waiting for the day when the truth breaks out. Staying and facing everything takes a lot of courage, but at least it preserves some dignity. Is Dominic coming? She asked. No, Miles shook his head. This is about our family, not about him. But don't worry, he'll have his own surprises. Avery looked up. What did you do to him? Nothing illegal, if that's what you're worried about. Miles shrugged. I just sent the same evidence to his ex-wife and a couple important clients. He had assured them he had changed and was no longer the cheating husband. Obviously, these assurances aren't worth much. Avery felt a wave of vertigo. It had never occurred to her that Dominic might have had such a history, such a commitment. Another lie, another truth she was kept in the dark about. I choose to stay, she said finally, her voice low but firm. I owe Harper and you that much. Miles nodded, his expression inscrutable. Then you have about 3 hours to prepare. At 9 o'clock, people will start arriving. These photos, the evidence. How did you get it? I'm not invading your privacy, if that's your problem. There's no hacking your cell phone or computer. Miles explains, this is all publicly visible information, social media posts, financial records from our shared accounts. Those photos were taken inadvertently by a friend or acquaintance, or by a private investigator I hired after suspicion, and are perfectly legal. Avery remembers those meetings she thought were hidden, those locations she thought were safe. Turns out, secrets are never really secrets. Why did I never realize you were so? Thoroughly, she asked, a hint of awe in her tone. Because you never really got to know me, Miles replied, his tone flat. Like you told Phoebe, we're too different. You're only seeing the surface, a man who can fix things, a husband who gets to work on time, a regular firefighter. You never see inside. That statement hurt more than any accusation because Avery knew it was true. She'd been complaining about her lack of understanding, but perhaps she hadn't understood Miles all the same. I'm going to take a shower and get dressed, she said, turning and getting ready to go upstairs, and then we'll talk. Miles nodded and began to adjust the lights on the unit. When the first guest, Avery's sister Phoebe, arrives, Avery is already dressed and sitting in one of the chairs in the living room. She wore a simple black dress with little to no makeup and her hair simply tied back. She looked haggard and tired, but composed. Phoebe walks in and looks at the contraption in surprise, then at Avery in confusion. What's this? Miles said there was a surprise, but I wasn't expecting it. Her voice faded with understanding. Oh, Avery. Yes, Avery said calmly. Everything is true. Me and Dominic. I betrayed Miles. Phoebe walked slowly towards the device, scrutinizing the photos and evidence. Her eyes widened when she read the words. I would never date him now. I was there, she whispered. I didn't stop you or even question you. I'm your accomplice. No, Avery shook her head. It was my choice, my mistake. You're just listening to me talk. More guests began to arrive. Avery's friend Naomi, several important clients, other family friends. Everyone who entered the room went through the same process. Shock, confusion, then understanding and judgment. Some tried to comfort Avery, others distanced themselves from her, and still others simply left, clearly not wanting to be involved in the situation. One of Avery's major clients, a high-end condo developer, canceled their ongoing partnership on the spot. Our brand image cannot be compared to. This behavior ties in, he explained calmly, avoiding looking her directly in the eye. Every rejection, every disappointed look was like another cut in Avery's heart. But the most painful moment is yet to come. At 9:30, Miles' car pulled into the driveway. He gets out of the car, walks to the passenger side, and opens the door to let Harper out. The 8-year-old girl wore a bright yellow dress and looked excited. Daddy says there's a surprise. She bounced toward the front door. Avery took a deep breath and prepared for the toughest conversation of her life. Miles has assured her that Harper won't see the evidence of impropriety. Those have been temporarily overwritten, but the core message will still be conveyed. Mom did something wrong, and Mom and Dad can't live together anymore. Harper paused in confusion when she saw the room full of people and that strange wooden structure. Is this some kind of party? Miles got down on one knee, so he was at eye level with his daughter. It's not a party, sweetheart. This is an important family conversation. There's something, Mom, and I need to tell you. Harper's smile disappeared as she acutely sensed the tension in the room. Is it bad? Miles and Avery exchanged a pained look. Yes, sweetheart, Avery said, his voice quivering. Something bad happened. Mom made a big mistake. Over the next few minutes, Miles and Avery explained the situation in a way that an 8-year-old could understand. They avoid all the adult details, but the core message is clear. Mom fell in love with another guy, cheated on Dad, and now they can't live together anymore. Harper's reaction ranges from confusion to shock and finally to tears of anger and sadness. She stood there, her small hands clenched into fists, her eyes wide open as tears began to pool in her eyes. Those tiny shoulders began to shake, and both Miles and Avery could see a child's world falling apart. But we're family, she cried out, her voice broken and filled with an agony that an 8-year-old couldn't fully comprehend. You said we'd always be together. You guys said it at my birthday party. You pulled the plug. She held out her little thumb as if to remind them of that promise. Miles remembers that promise. It was on Harper's 7th birthday, and the family was in the treehouse in the backyard, which Miles had just finished building. Harper asked for reassurance that they'd always be a family, and he and Avery smiled at that moment and held out their pinkies to hook up with their daughter. That image seems so ironic now. Sometimes, even when people love each other very much, they do things that hurt each other. Miles explained gently, kneeling down to be at eye level with his daughter and holding her crying daughter, feeling her tiny body sobbing in his arms. Sometimes it's best to live separate lives, but we still love you just the same, and that will never change. I don't want you to separate, Harper insisted, tears rolling down her cheeks, her voice breaking from sobbing. Will the other people be separated too? Will Lily's mom and dad be separated too? Will everyone be separated? Miles is heartbroken. Harper begins to question the stability of all relationships, which is exactly what he fears. Her worldview is being reshaped and trust is being destroyed. Harper suddenly turned to Avery, an almost desperate hope shining in her eyes. Mom, apologize. Tell Dad you're sorry, and then we can go home together. I'll be better behaved, I promise. I'll clean up my toys. I won't make any noise, please. This self-blame, thinking it's her fault her parents are divorcing, breaks both Avery's and Miles' hearts at the same time. Oh, baby, it's not your fault, Miles said immediately. Don't ever think that. This is a matter between adults, not you. Avery's heart is broken. She crouches down and tries to hold her daughter, but Harper ducks away, withdrawing back like a frightened deer and clinging to Miles' leg as if he were the only safe harbor. That small gesture hurt more than any words. Harper chose her dad and rejected her. "I'm so sorry, Harper," she said, tears streaming down her face. Her voice choked. "I'm so sorry. But some things can't be fixed by just apologizing. It's like when your glass snow globe breaks. Even if we glue the pieces back together, it won't be the same as it was. But you can fix it," Harper insisted, with a child's characteristic stubbornness shining in his eyes. "Daddy can fix anything. He fixed my bike. He fixed the kitchen faucet. He can fix this." Her eyes were filled with absolute trust in her father's abilities. Miles and Avery exchange a sad look. There are some things that even a superhero dad can't fix. Harper's rejection is like a knife through Avery's heart. In that moment, she truly understood the cost of her actions. Not just the loss of her husband and family, but the loss of her daughter's trust and love. The others in the room silently stepped back to give the broken family some space. Some leave quietly, others stay to provide silent support. Eventually, Miles decides to take Harper for a walk to calm her down. When they leave, Avery is left alone with the remaining guests, feeling incredibly lonely. Phoebe came over and sat next to her. "Are you okay?" Avery laughed bitterly. "No, I'm not good at all. But I deserved it." "It's not a matter of deserving it or not," Phoebe said. "You made a mistake, a serious one. But you're still my sister, and I love you." "Will Harper forgive me?" Avery asked, fear in his voice. "Give her time," Phoebe reassured. "Kids are resilient. But you need to make changes and prove yourself worthy of her trust." The next few weeks became the hardest time in Avery's life. She moved out of her home and rented a small apartment. Miles was awarded primary custody of Harper, which the court decided based on her infidelity and Harper's apparent wishes. Avery is scheduled to visit every other weekend and some holidays. Miles maintains his dignity and composure, never speaking ill of Avery in public, but keeping a polite distance from her. He only communicates with Harper on matters involving her, briefly and directly. Dominic cuts off contact with Avery almost immediately after the truth becomes public. She sent dozens of text messages and made countless phone calls, but they all went stone cold. The man who once said, "I'll always be there for you," was the first to leave the ship when the storm hit. As Miles says, Dominic faces his own consequences. Rather than opt for violence or obvious retaliation, Miles takes a more precise approach, the truth. He sent the same evidence packet to Dominic's ex-wife, several key investors in the current project, and several members of the Architects Association. The result is a professional and social chain reaction. Dominic lost two important design projects. The investor terminated the contract on the basis of a morality clause. His ex-wife used this new evidence to ask for a review of the division of property in their divorce. And friends in his social circle began to distance themselves from him, especially those who were married, fearing that their partners would be the next target. 3 weeks later, Avery meets Dominic by chance at the local coffee shop. He looked haggard and anxious, no longer the confident and successful architect. When he saw her, his eyes were first surprised, then a repulsion that bordered on fear, and finally turned cold. He turned away without even saying hello. Through a mutual friend, Avery hears that Dominic plans to move to the West Coast for a fresh start. She's even more shocked to learn that his pattern of betrayal has been going on for years apparently. Avery isn't the first special friend he's married to. In fact, she's just the latest in a long list. Using the lure of understanding the artistic soul, Dominic specializes in finding married women in the midst of their careers and building relationships by providing them with the appreciation and understanding they crave. The discovery both angers and humiliates Avery. Not only did she hurt her family, but she became prey to a veteran. But the anger was quickly replaced by self-loathing. After all, she was the one who had chosen to betray, no matter how well-crafted the temptation. Meanwhile, Avery's career has been hit hard. Since the day of the exhibition, things have been falling apart. She lost 3 major clients, including the high-end condominium developer who terminated her contract because the company's image did not match her personal values. Word of mouth in the community has also plummeted, especially among those who are family customers. As one former client euphemistically put it, "If you can lie to your husband and daughter, you're probably not trustworthy in business either. The studio phone hardly rings anymore, and comments on social media have gone from praise to indifference to occasional vitriol. Avery has to fire her only assistant, a young, talented designer who once looked up to Avery as a role model. "I'm really sorry, Jade," Avery said, handing over the final paycheck. "I don't have enough projects to sustain two people." Jade nodded, a mixture of sympathy and disappointment in her expression. "I understand. I hope you're okay, Avery." She paused for a moment as if considering whether to say the next sentence. "You know, I've always admired your ability to balance career and family. You made me believe it was possible." The words pierced Avery's heart like a knife. How many young women was she once a role model for? How proud she used to be to show that she had it all: a successful career, a happy family. Now, everything is a lie. The studio moved from the bustling city center to a much smaller space in the suburbs with much cheaper rent. Avery has had to reposition her business, taking on smaller projects and sometimes even work she would have considered inadequate in the past. She began to rebuild her credibility from scratch, one client after another. But most painful of all is Harper's estrangement. At first, the girl refuses to be alone with Avery on visiting days, insisting that Miles or Phoebe be present. She rarely spoke and barely looked Avery in the eye. Every time she says goodbye, she clings to Miles as if she's afraid Avery will take her away. One day, after another awkward visit, Avery broke down in the car. She finally fully understands the full consequences of her actions, not only for herself, but for Miles, for Dominic, and for the innocent Harper. It was at that moment that she decided to stop feeling sorry for herself and start making real changes. She began seeing a psychotherapist to learn what drove her to seek an emotional connection outside of marriage and why she chose to cheat rather than confront the problem directly. She begins to confront her flaws and insecurities and works to become a more authentic and honest person. She writes a long letter to Miles, not to ask for forgiveness or to get back together, but to sincerely apologize, admit her mistakes, and express her regret for the hurt he has suffered. "I used to think you didn't understand me," she wrote in the letter. "But the truth is, I never made any effort to understand you. You gave me security, stability, and love, and I took them for granted. I don't know if our marriage could have been saved, but I do know that I chose to end it in the most despicable way possible. For that, I will regret it for the rest of my life." Miles didn't reply to that letter, but the next time he handed over Harper, he was slightly gentler. With Harper, Avery takes a different approach. Instead of trying to force a return to her former intimacy, she began to rebuild it by honoring her daughter's feelings. She waited patiently, proving her reliability and honesty one step at a time. "I know Mommy hurt you and Daddy," Avery said calmly one day when Harper refused another hug. "And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I want you to know that no matter what happens, I love you, and I'll be here when you're ready to trust me again." Harper slowly began to relax as time went on. It started with a willingness to eat lunch alone with Avery, then a willingness to spend the night in her small apartment, and eventually a renewed interest in sharing stories about school and friends. The process was slow and painful, full of setbacks and frustrations, but Avery persevered. A year later, life in Denver has taken on a new normal. Miles is still a junior chief of the fire department, but he abandoned his plans to open a fire equipment store to focus on being a full-time father. He starts dating, very carefully keeping these relationships separate from Harper's life. Avery rebuilt her design business on a much smaller scale, but focused on the work she truly loved. She began to rediscover her artistic talent by organizing exhibitions in small galleries. She wasn't looking for a new relationship and felt she needed more time to be alone and learn about herself. Harper is settling into his new family arrangement, although he still occasionally asks why Mom and Dad can't get back together. Her performance in school suffered a bit, but with the help of her teachers and counselors, she began to regain her confidence. Dominic moved to the West Coast to start a new life. He is said to be engaged, although some rumors claim that his new fiancée is also married. Some people never change. For Avery, the biggest change was internal. She no longer associates her value with external recognition and no longer sees herself through the eyes of others. She learned to be alone, to be honest, and to be responsible for her choices. One day, when she comes to pick up Harper for the weekend, Miles invites her in for a cup of coffee, the first social invitation since the separation. "I'd like to talk about Harper's summer camp options," he explained, but in a friendly tone. Avery nodded, feeling a strange sense of familiarity, sitting in the kitchen where she once was. That art installation has long since been dismantled and the house redecorated, leaving no trace of that day. But the memories remain and will always be there. "You look good," Miles said, handing her a cup of coffee, still remembering that she liked a little cinnamon. "Thanks," she replied. "The therapy helped a lot." "What about you?" "I'm okay," he shrugged, focusing on Harper and work. Counseling at the police department has also helped. They discussed summer camp options, then school, then Harper's desire for a pet. The conversation was relaxed and polite, two adults working together for the sake of their mutual daughter. As Harper ran down the stairs to spend the weekend with Avery, she stopped dead in her tracks when she saw her parents sitting together in the kitchen. "Are you guys getting back together?" she asked, hope shining in her eyes. Miles and Avery exchanged a sad look. "No, sweetheart," Avery said gently. "Daddy and I aren't going to get back together. But we will always love you and always try to work together for you." Harper's expression darkened for a moment, but she nodded as if accepting the reality. "Okay, but at least you can talk properly now." "Yes," Miles agreed. "We can talk properly." When Avery and Harper left, Miles stood in the doorway and watched them get into the car. For a moment, Avery wonders if things would have been different if she'd been more honest in the first place, if she'd expressed her dissatisfaction directly instead of turning to an outside source for solace. But the past can't be changed. All she can do is move on, try to make amends, and be a better person for Harper's sake and for her own. She started the car and glanced in the rearview mirror. Miles is still standing in the doorway, probably pondering similar what-ifs. Then he turned to go back inside and closed the door, as if closing a chapter in the past. Avery took a deep breath and turned to Harper. "So, want to go get some ice cream?" One early morning, 5 years later, Avery stood at the window of her new apartment, looking out over the Denver skyline as the morning light began to illuminate the city's silhouette. The apartment is small, but cozy and comfortable, and on the walls are a few of the pieces she has created since she got back to painting. For the first time in years, she has reconnected with her artistic roots. She's 45 now, and the years are showing on her features. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes, a few strands of silver mixed in with her curly brown hair. Her mirror self is no longer the ambitious young designer, but a woman who has weathered the storms of life, with scars, but also with wisdom. Her career is gradually stabilizing, though on a far smaller scale. She takes on small residential projects and occasionally provides free design consultations for local community centers and schools. This approach has allowed her to reclaim the original intent of design, not to win accolades or amass wealth, but to create beautiful spaces that make people's lives more comfortable. Social circles have also changed. The friends she once had, people who only showed up when she was successful, are long gone. But she built new relationships that were more real and deeper. She even dated occasionally, though it didn't develop into a serious relationship. Whenever someone started to become intimate, she instinctively backed away, partly out of fear and partly because she felt she didn't yet deserve her new happiness. Harper is now a beautiful 13-year-old girl with her mother's artistry and her father's fortitude. She's grown taller and is starting to show teenage features, but her eyes are still that bright blue, like Miles. She is intelligent and sensitive, but also carries some precocious melancholy, as if she understands the complexities of life better than her peers. Repairing her relationship with Harper is Avery's most difficult and rewarding accomplishment. The first few months were almost suffocating. Harper refused to be alone with her, and every visit was spent in agonizing silence. Avery once asked a psychotherapist in despair, "Have I lost her forever?" The therapist's response gave her hope. Kids need time, but they also need consistency. Keep showing up, keep trying, and don't give up. One day she'll see you trying. The turning point occurred on Harper's 10th birthday. Avery bought her a professional drawing kit, knowing that her daughter had recently shown an interest in art. But the real gift was a handmade photo album documenting each of Harper's birthdays, from birth to the present, paired with Avery's handwritten memories and epiphanies. When Harper turns to the last page and sees the letter Avery wrote to her, she starts to cry. That letter was neither a defense nor a plea for forgiveness, just an expression of unconditional love and pride in the growth of our daughter. That night, Harper voluntarily hugged his mother for the first time. From there, the relationship began a slow repair. Instead of the carefree mother-daughter relationship of old, it's more thoughtful, more cautious, but also more real. Harper begins to look to Avery for advice, especially about art and creative writing. She begins to share stories about school and friends. And, occasionally, she even spends the night at Avery's apartment, where the two of them bake cookies and watch old movies together. Miles recently remarried to an elementary school teacher named Elaine, whom they met at Harper's parent-teacher conference. Elaine is a gentle, strong woman who fully accepts Miles' past and respects Harper's relationship with his birth mother. Harper seems to like her stepmother, which gives Avery a sigh of relief and a twinge of inexplicable sourness. Both happiness that Miles has found new happiness and sadness that she's lost that possibility forever. Miles and Avery have also reached a state of peace in their relationship. They are no longer friends, and never will be, but they learned to have effective communication as Harper's parents. They were able to sit politely side by side and applaud their daughter at school events and important occasions. Just last month, Avery was invited to participate in Harper's school art show. My daughter's work, an abstract painting on the theme of family, won the first prize. The painting is divided into two parts, symbolizing her separate yet connected family life. At the celebration, Avery overhears Harper explaining her complicated family situation to a curious classmate. "My mom made a big mistake that hurt our whole family. But she acknowledged it and tried to do better. I guess that's something you learn growing up. People make mistakes, even people who love you. What matters is how they face those mistakes." Upon hearing these words, Avery ducks into the restroom and sheds a tear. Not tears of sadness, but tears of release and gratitude. She has lost so much: an intact family, a once wonderful marriage, years of carefree intimacy with her daughter, professional reputation, self-esteem. But she also learned valuable lessons about honesty, about responsibility, about the consequences of choices. Back at her apartment, Avery pulls out a small box containing a photo from that year's art installation, her wedding photo with Miles. She gently touched the smiling faces of the young couple in the photo, when they were full of hope and believed that love could conquer all. She remembered that horrible morning when that loud noise woke her up and she rushed downstairs to see that horrible sight. Her betrayal revealed, her lies exposed, her family torn apart. That moment changed everything, but maybe it needed to happen. That painful awakening allowed her to finally face herself and the truth. Sometimes it is only when the mirror breaks that we can see our true reflection. In that broken glass, Avery finally sees himself, imperfect, flawed, but with the opportunity to rebuild and become more real and whole. The price of betrayal was much higher than she had ever imagined, and once a relationship was broken, it could never be fully restored. But in the rubble, she finds the possibility of rebuilding, not rebuilding the past, but creating a more honest future. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.